Good evening, everyone. My name is Amber Valangas, and I want to welcome you this evening to the Restorative Action Alliance webinar, Balancing Hope, Joy, and Challenge, Navigating Life on the Registry. I am the Executive Director of the Restorative Action Alliance, and our program tonight features a moderated discussion with 3 individuals who have experienced successes while navigating the registry. But before we get into the discussion, I'll briefly tell you about Restorative Action Alliance. We are a regional organization and we are working to end cycles of sexual violence and systemic state violence. Our members include crime survivors, people impacted by the criminal legal system, legal professionals, treatment providers, researchers, academics, restorative practitioners, and other justice-minded individuals. Together, what we envision is a world restored from harm where every person has an opportunity to heal, grow, and thrive. So, in a few moments, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator. But first, we have a few housekeeping things to take care of. So please note that closed captioning is available. So if you want to activate it, you simply select the closed caption button found at the bottom of your screen. And if anyone has a question for our panelists, please use the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to answer your questions during the Q&A portion. If we can't get to your question tonight, we will be sharing our contact information at the end of this discussion, and then you can reach out to us and we will try to get your question answered. Again, just a reminder that closed captioning is available, and to activate that, simply select that at the bottom of your screen. So with all of those items addressed, I am very, very excited to turn this over to our moderator tonight, Jason Wasserman, who is the president of Restorative Action Alliance.
Thank you, Amber. And before I start, thank you everyone for being here. I know it's always fun to jump on Zoom on Wednesday nights. Is today Wednesday? Yeah. And I want to thank our panelists for being with us. We have a really interesting evening ahead of us. So thank you. I'm going to be introducing our 3 panelists briefly. The webinar title tonight was Balancing Hope, Joy, and Challenge, Navigating Life on the Registry. So what you're going to hear tonight is from 3 people who have had some successes in their lives while they're on the registry. So I'm going to just get right into it. We're going to go one at a time and let them, I'm going to introduce them a little, let them, okay, I was told check my microphone, its volume. There we go. So I'm going to tell a little bit about each person, let them then share some information about themselves and their story. Then we're going to have some questions that we've prepared, and then we're going to open it up to some questions from everybody that's here listening in. So without further ado, we'll jump into our first panelist is Robert Suttle. Robert is a consultant to advocacy organizations and a thought leader confronting critical issues such as HIV criminalization, stigma, and discrimination with a focus on equity and social justice. Robert chairs the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation Council of Justice Leaders and is a global advisory panel member of the HIV Justice Network. He is also a co-founder of the Zero Project, and Robert authored the foreword of Alexander McClellan's book, Criminalized Lives, HIV, and Legal Violence. So that's a very brief listing of some of Robert's credentials, and with many more. And I know he's going to talk a little bit tonight, and he's going to be addressing community involvement through the lens of working as an LGBTQ HIV activist while living on the registry. So, Robert, you're up.
Thank you, Jason, and hello, everyone. It's good to be here this evening to share with you about my lived experience. I am a person who is living with HIV for 22 years now. And as a result of being diagnosed HIV positive, it is an experience that I've encountered, which led me to have an experience within the criminal justice system. And that experience is what we call HIV criminalization. And because of that experience, it obviously changed my life. And it is through that experience that I was required to be on the sex offense registry for 15 years in the state of Louisiana, which is where I'm originally from. It's where I was, did all my education. It's also where I received my diagnosis as I was attempting to enlist into the military. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to serve because of my HIV status. And so, fast forward 5 years from my diagnosis, or the year of my diagnosis, I was involved in a casual relationship with someone who alleged that I did not disclose my HIV status to them. And as a result of that experience, I was arrested at work, I was prosecuted, and ultimately I was required to spend 6 months in prison. There's a lot more involved in that story, but that is pretty much the gist of it. And at that time when I was convicted, I wasn't aware that I had to register on the sex offense registry. It was never discussed in my case or anything like that. So I found out when I went to the probation office, and that is where I first learned that I had to be on the sex offense registry. And so you used to say in Louisiana they require you to have sex offender on your driver's license, do all the community notifications, and pay all the fees. And so I definitely went through all of that. And how I've been able to push forward, I was able to connect with a colleague who was working on this issue around HIV criminalization. And I learned that this wasn't just something that happened to me. This is something that potentially can happen to all of the millions of people that are living with HIV in the US as well as around the world. And so through that, the first thing I attempted to do was share my story. I was able to share my experience around the world before I ever even shared it here in the US. So we did a short film called HIV is Not a Crime, and it is where I first began to share about my experience having on film and able for everyone to be able to see the driver's license with sex offender under your name, which was shocking to most people. And through that, we decided to create an organization. I co-founded an organization called the Zero Project, which represented many people who have been prosecuted based on their HIV status. And depending on which state they lived in, they may or may not were required to have to be on the sex offense registry. And through that, I had to relocate to New York State, but I've lived in other places, Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, as well as Washington, D.C. And even in those places, I go through the process of figuring out whether or not I needed to register in those states. And so currently I am in New York and I'm still required to be registered here. Unfortunately, the way the law is written in Louisiana, I assumed that I would have been given credit for no matter where I was, that if I was in compliance for 15 years, that I would be fine. But unfortunately, what I've later learned since I left that state and have been here in New York, that time started over. So I'm actually beyond the 15 years of having to be on the registry and currently having to do 10 more years here in New York because it's required for 20 years for those of us that are out of state. And so I've had to learn a lot about my experience, which is how I got here. Uh, it's like, why did this happen? How did this happen? And that is what I've spent most of over the past decade of my life doing, and also uplifting the fact that I am a Black man, a gay man, a person living with HIV. I am a person who is formerly incarcerated and a person who has to be have experience on the registry. And so I bring all of those identities forward to educate people about my experience around HIV criminalization, as well as to explain to them about what life is like being on the registry. That's a lot to unpack for people, but it is something that has really helped me over the years to deal with the trauma of going through an criminalization experience. And so most people feel like you're re-traumatizing, but for me, it's been very therapeutic. because I want people to know. I want people to be aware, not just about what happened to me, but the potential of what could happen to any of us. The fact that if we lack awareness, we don't know what could potentially happen to us. We don't know what our destiny would be. And I don't know why I was given this slot, but because it happened to me, it was important that I do something with it. And I've been able to connect with thousands of people around the world who are doing work to address HIV criminalization, as well as to address issues of people with this lived experience on the registry. Um, I've moved around from various states, and so the process is a lot different. Each time, some better than worse, or some not as worse as others. Um, Currently, I'm still going through it here in New York State, and I've even attempted to go to court around this issue, but the New York State basically kicked it back to Louisiana to say, well, if Louisiana requires it, then you have to do it here. And so there's injustice there, but if it's one thing that I've learned being here on the registry is that what people have to go through, even if after they've done all their time and their commitments. But what I've tried to do is educate people. That is something that I'm finding that in this country that our people lack. They lack the education around a lot of issues, and they judge people based on their biases or the ways that they've been socialized. But I find that education is key because there are people who are shocked by some of the experiences that we have. And the only way for them to know what those experiences are is that we share them. So I strongly stress um, storytelling. It's a power and a strategy to that. Your story matters. And one way to counter all of the negativity is to shine light on what's happening, what's happening to you. And so that is something that I've uh, have used since day one, since I opened my mouth, because if I didn't open my mouth, then it would mean that I'm okay with what's happening to me. And as many of you or us are aware that there are plenty, again, injustices that have that come through this experience of being on the registry that needs to be looked at even more closely. And so that is what I try to uplift. My experience, as well as the experience of others, I've been able to connect with other people who are living with HIV who've had the experiences in their state. And so it's unfortunate. It is very unfortunate. And understand that you know, storytelling is so important because people need to understand the nuances of these experiences and that it's not just black and white.
Robert, wow. So it's an incredible story, and if I was wearing my podcast co-host hat today, I'd have a million questions right now for you. But we do have to keep going with the program, but I mean, just the bravery for what you've done, and it's incredible, and the speaking that you're doing, and I just applaud you for everything. So now we're gonna have Kim come on camera. Kim is an administrative assistant. That's what she wrote for herself, but I would say that's an understatement for Restorative Action Alliance. She's a mother of five. She's a proud grandmother to a lively 3-year-old grandson. As a registry impacted individual and survivor of sexual harm, she channels her experience into advocacy, art, and writing. Kim is actively involved in efforts to create meaningful change through her work with Safer Virginia, the National Coalition Against Conviction Registries, the Shine Women on the Registry Group, and with us at Restorative Action Alliance. You didn't include that, Kim. Kim is passionate about empowering others on their healing journeys and standing up for those who face oppression. In her free time, Kim expresses her creativity through art. She shares her thoughts and experiences. She has a blog. It's healitwithkimness.substack.com. If somebody has access to that, you could put that in there. And Kim is going to talk now about her cross country journey, a literal cross country journal while on the registry. So, Kim, it's the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Jason. So as Jason said, I have been required to register for the past 14 years. When my life fell apart, I ended up in prison. I ended up on the registry. But I always had a dream to take an RV trip around the country. But once I ended up on the registry, I thought this dream was impossible. And then just after I got off probation, all of a sudden this unexpected opportunity came along. And I was really fortunate that I had a friend. I had shared my dream of traveling with her, and she offered me a free RV and a place to stay when I wasn't traveling so that I could save on living expenses. So I started saving money, and I talked to some police officers and a lawyer, and I spent several months researching registry laws in every state where I wanted to travel. And I carefully mapped out a trip, a route, so that I could stay in each place within the legal limits so that I wouldn't need to register as a visitor anywhere. And while I was doing this planning, the SORNA law went into effect. And that almost derailed my plans. I got really discouraged. I almost gave up. And I just felt like there'd be too many roadblocks and it would just be impossible for me to safely do this trip. You can just feel like your life is over when you get on the registry. But the thing is, I had this opportunity of a lifetime, and so I just became determined that I was going to make it happen. I got to this point where I just was so fed up with the system taking so much from me. So I decided that I was going to pursue my dream no matter what. And 2 months later, I hit the road, just me and my cat and my 25-foot RV with car in tow. So I took a southern route from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. And in LA, I met my daughter, and she traveled with me up Highway 1 up through California and into Oregon. And that was a terrifying thrill ride in my big rig, but I'm so glad I did it. It was quite an adventure. And then I traveled inland, and I slowly wound my way back east. So this was a 3-month trip. And like a lot of people on the registry, finances have always been an issue for me. So whenever possible, I would camp free on public land to save money. And that often meant that I didn't know where I was going to stay until I found a spot. Sometimes that was kind of scary. And it was really easy to get in a bad situation going down these sketchy dirt roads, and sometimes getting stuck with no way to turn around. But I experienced a lot of challenges and throughout my trip, and I narrowly avoided forest fires. I drove over an 8,500-foot mountain in this unexpected snowstorm. I battled high winds, sometimes thinking my RV was going to get completely knocked over. I had quite a few mechanical problems. And I even had to dig my RV out of the sand one time. So I now get why they call it the Wild West. But somehow I got through it all. There were a lot of scary, uncertain moments, but there was also some incredible miracles. And I had this constant sense that someone was looking out for me. But navigating this trip on the registry was like kind of like walking through a minefield, if you know what I mean. I mentioned earlier that I did a lot of preparation to avoid getting in legal trouble. But even so, at the end of my trip, I ran into what could have been a really serious situation, and it was very upsetting for me at the time. There was an officer in my home state that I'd never met who decided to make it her mission to make an issue out of the fact that I was on this long trip. So she threatened me with prosecution because I'd been away from home for so long, even though I'd basically gotten approval from 3 other officers. So I rushed home. I cut my trip a little bit short and tried to get back as quickly as I could. I was, you know, it was really stressful. I went home thinking that I was probably going to get arrested. But I also had this peace knowing that I hadn't done anything wrong, that I was within my legal rights. And while that might not matter to the legal system, that mattered to me. But thankfully nothing came of it, and you know, that all went away, but it still caused me unnecessary stress and kind of, you know, robbed me of the fun of my last, you know, couple of weeks. But I knew going in that there were risks to this trip, and I did everything that I could to prepare for them. I did my homework. I knew my rights, so that I could confidently stand up for them. And I can honestly say, though, that I feel like it was well worth all the risks and all the difficulties, because in addition to the challenges, it was an opportunity for me to play and explore and grow. And most importantly to me, it was a spiritual journey that I felt called to take. And it stretched me in ways I never imagined. It taught me to trust in God and myself more deeply. So it was one of the most wonderful, amazing things that I have ever done. It was so exciting. It was empowering. It was awe-inspiring, all the things that I saw. And in spite of all the hard stuff, I'm so glad I took this trip. It was worth it all, and it made me a braver, stronger person. And I know I'll never be the same again. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Jason. Thanks.
Thanks, Kim. And again, you know, it's that story is amazing. The fact that you were able to overcome and do that, despite the obstacles and the barriers and the issues and all the planning that you had to do. You know, other people want to take a trip and you spend some time thinking about it, you plan it out, and it's exciting. But when you're on the registry and you're balancing all of that, it's not just a matter of planning the trip, but now you've got all these other risks that you have to factor, and what if this happens and what if that happens. And I know we both know people who've psyched themselves out of not even bothering to take the trip. So the fact that you've done it and you had this memory is amazing. And just like, you know, when Robert was talking before about getting out and speaking, you know, people, it takes so much uh, extra. I'm not sure what the right word is, but more energy, more commitment to do this stuff. So anybody who's successful while they're on the registry at doing it, it's just amazing. These are great stories. And we have one more. So we're going to turn to Willie. Willie, I'm going to invite you to turn on your camera.
All right.
So Willie graduated in the spring of 2025. So we're talking this year with a Bachelor of Arts in criminology from the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. In 2007, I was going back a little way, Willie completed a 350-hour CASACT program. Can I spell out what that is? Is that
Yes,
right?
sir.
So
Case.
that is a credentialed
Oh,
alcohol and substance abuse counselor trainer. That he did that program at the Outreach Training Institute. Willie works in construction and plans to pursue a master's in forensic mental health counseling at John Jay College of Criminal Justice starting this fall. And Willie is also an active speaker at workshops and panels on the challenges of being on the sex offense registry in New York State. So now Willie is going to talk about pursuing education, higher education, while on the registry. Willie,
hi,
welcome.
how you doing, Jason? Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining and listening. My name is Willie Trent, and as you mentioned, I'm going to discuss what it's like being on the registry and actually pursuing education. So briefly, I got on the registry in 2006. 1998, I got put on the registry. Being young, being mischievous, had interactions with an underage young lady. She got pregnant. The police portrayed it as if she was kidnapped. I went down there to help out with the kidnapping. It wasn't no kidnapping. It was a statutory rape. Long story short, 12 years in prison, come home, life on the registry. Originally, it wasn't life on the registry. It was 20 years, but they changed the laws. They made it life. So coming home, it was very challenging. I didn't really know what to expect, in terms of how to adjust after being gone for such a long duration of time. So I get home, I said, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to work. I'm just going to pick the pieces up, get my life going. So I had to go through like a battery of tests, psychological tests. Parole commissioners had to sign on for me to go to school because they had a lot of restrictions and zones that you're not allowed to attend to certain areas, and they might have campuses and daycares. So with all of those restrictions, it was a big deal in terms of being able to access any colleges in person. And they also had to ban the box at this particular time with college application number 10 asks, have you ever been convicted of a felony? So that was on every application at that time. And then you have to write yes, you have to explain your criminal history, you have to produce your rap sheet. And that usually ended with a we can't go forward with the application at this time. So at first I thought it was just an isolated incident. I was like, well, let me try another college. And then it was the same thing and the same thing and the same thing. And I'm like, so when you can't go to college once you're on the registry, is there some kind of like maybe I'm missing something or whatever? So instead of looking into my area where I was from, which is Long Island, I said, well, I'll go to the five boroughs. I'll go to New York and I'll have a greater chance there because it's the city. And being it's the city and it's not like a little hamlet like the island, Suffolk County, I'll do better over there. Unbeknownst to me, it wasn't too much of a difference. So I'm like, I would go through the application process. Everything will be good. I'll fill out the 5-page essay. I'll bring the rap sheet. I'll meet and have an interview with the dean and the board of trustees and the campus safety, and everything will seem as though it was good. And then I would get the letter like a week or two later. We've denied your application at this time. Reapply in 2 years. So it was 2 year intervals at a time. I'm like, this can't be possible. That's longer than a parole board. 2 years at a time. It's not even a year, too. So I keep going through the various colleges in New York. Eventually, I find a program called Prison Reentry Institute. This was a program actually at John Jay. So they had a bunch of college students, really bright students who were really committed activists to social justice. So they spoke with me. I met them at a workshop, and it was like, we would like to see if we can help get you to access college. I was like, phenomenal, let's do it. So that journey went for approximately 6 years with me and John Jay and the students going to various colleges, shopping around and receiving the same answers. No, 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 no. So eventually we said, listen, we pretty much was exhausted with going through all the colleges. What is the possibility of us actually pursuing me getting an application at John Jay? Now, John Jay is a 4 year college and I'm coming with a GED. So I really don't have much college background and I have a lengthy criminal history. So they're like, well, you're not the ideal candidate for a 4 year college. We wanted to get you in a 2 year college and see what you do from there. So I'm like, we've already exhausted the 2 year colleges. It doesn't really look too promising or whatever. So they were very ingenious students. They were like, what we figured out from all the years of college shopping is that the people on the lower level were more likely to say yes, but the people on a higher level, because they had no interaction with me, were likely to say no. They're going to look at the paperwork. They're just like, we just can't chance it. We don't know Willie from Adam, and we don't want to, get to know him either. So we just err on the side of caution and tell them no. So I says, well, being that I got a little 6 years with you guys shopping around with me and John Jay, even though I don't know nobody, I'm kind of like adopted son in so many ways. Like nobody really adopted me, but you've been working with me for 6 years. I've been speaking with the faculty. I've been speaking with a lot of the staff members. Maybe they can vouch for me in terms of accessing the college. So they're like, well, it's going to be a long shot, but we'll see what we can do. Lo and behold, they came up with a real ingenious way because none of the faculty wanted to put their names on the line. So he says, what if we could get the campus safety, the head of safety? If the head of safety would extend himself to put his name on the line, then it would make it easy for the faculty to support him, and I may be able to get in. So they was like, well, it's a long shot, but let's see if we can do it. So we actually did that. The head of campus safety came down. He was an ex-FBI guy, very sharp, very shrewd. And he says, what's your story, kid? And he actually gave me interview. And he said, I'm going to let you in. And that was just like that. 6 years later, I was actually allowed into college. It was like a long, very long journey. So it was very shocking once I finally got allowed in. I was like, I'm actually in, and I didn't really expect to come in, but I was in. And it became a very interesting journey once getting in, because once I made contact with one particular person that was accepting to me, when my name came on another desk who didn't know me, it was like reset. So I made a report with Jason, but I don't know Sally, and Jason's not in, Sally's in, and I have to repeat the process all over again. So, but lo and behold, it was a very good program. I got into John Jay. They in turn introduced me to other programs. Wasn't a lot of capital, but it was rich in people. So they had the latest network of what was going on, like workshops and things such as that. So they referred me to a program that was being spearheaded at St. Francis College by Dr. Horowitz, Emily Horowitz. She had a working group. And the working group was for individuals who had criminal justice backgrounds who wanted to access college. And this particular night, the theme was people on the registry. So I went to that group. I actually met enormous people through that group. That's why I actually met Amber and many, many other great people. And that was the beginning of a wonderful journey in terms of academia. I actually graduated. It took me 8 years. I had to pay out of pocket. For some reason, my financial aid never went through. And then I started working. I made decent money. So, I paid my whole way through. And, at the end of the day, it was worth it. I graduated, and I'm looking forward to my master's degree now. And it just was an overall great experience. And I'll look forward to continuing more with the topic once you open up the floor.
That's great, Willie. Thank you. I mean, again, like resilience is the word that comes to mind. Just sticking with it and keep going. And what a great story. And you're going to keep going, and that just says a whole lot about you and your character. So congratulations.
Thanks a lot.
And I'm going to invite. We're going to start. We're going to ask a few questions and go around. I'm going to ask Kim and Robert to join us back on camera, and I'm going to start. Kim, if you could, what advice would you give to someone who feels held back by fear or who's oppressed by the registry restrictions but wants to pursue a bold dream?
Well, Jason, I don't want to minimize the trauma and the fear that comes with being on the registry. It's real, it's legitimate, it's not just paranoia. There's a reason that we feel that way. And because we never know when something's going to come along and knock you down. But what I realized is that while the registry has taken so much from my outer world, but they can't take anything from within me unless I let them. And I've just become determined not to let them take any more from me than they already have. There's a sense that you can't pursue your dreams when you're on the registry. And yes, the limitations are real, but my advice is don't let them rob you of the right to pursue your dreams. You may not be able to eliminate your fear, but you've probably heard it said before, you can do it afraid. And there were not many days on my 3-month trip when I wasn't afraid. I spent the entire last week rushing home under the threat of being arrested. So pursuing this dream did not come without fear for me, but I learned that I can persevere even with fear, and that I can overcome challenges. I learned that there are some things they simply can't take away from me. No one can take away from me unless I let them. And it has taken years of healing for me, but I've reached this place where I just refuse to let them have any more. And I want to encourage others that you can find that strength too. So I think that's what I'd say.
All right. No, thank you, Kim. I'm going to ask Robert the next one. So, you've used your lived experience to educate the public about HIV, LGBTQ issues, and the realities of living on the registry. What have been some of the most effective ways you've engaged in public education, and what impact have you seen from sharing your story?
Well, as I said earlier, one of the ways is just opening my mouth and speaking about the experience. we find that many people are afraid, or they don't know how to articulate their story. They know what they feel and they know what they went through, but to articulate it and to do it with confidence. Um, as Kim said, there are times, yeah, you definitely have to do it afraid. And other times I've had opportunities to go to many different conferences, many different workshops, webinars. I mean, at this point, I feel like I've done all the sort of things that you could do from, and I'm continuing to do even now, more podcasts, just reaching more and more people, being visible. People reach out to me all the time saying, wow, I see what you're talking about. And they said that people are afraid. Sometimes people literally are afraid to, or they're afraid of the perception of what other people will think about them. And it's true and it's real. And Kim just articulated that so well. The fear is real. And for me, I felt I had nothing else to lose. I lost my career, and opportunities, and so, as Kim just said, I was like, well, can't take away my voice. And so, as I said, I used it, and it has really opened up doors, and it's really shocked and wowed people, because they are like, wow, it's such confidence, so bold, so brave, all the things. But for me, it just felt like the natural thing to do, because what else could I do? Again, I felt like my career was over, and so I have to be creative. I have to be very creative in how do I rebuild myself, my image, or the way I think about myself or see myself. That took work, but I did it, and I never looked back. I just kept going, and that's really how I've uh, persevere. I kept moving. I kept
Yeah.
doing something, kept thinking, kept uh, pushing the boundaries, because I needed to see how far I could go with this experience, and being sort of in this uh, this restriction of this policy that they're enforcing around the registry, and people with criminal records and things like that. Like, I'm really curious about how all this works, and I think at least for me, I think I figured it out. But that is ways that the opportunities and the ways that I've been able to just sort of thrive. It's just really standing, as they say now, these standing on business, um, about my experience, and not backing down, not cowering in fear, because they don't scare me anymore. I'm not afraid anymore, because I know my power, and I'm standing in it, and I'm only reflecting back what they are doing to us. And so that's why I say it's important for you to understand what you're in, and speak that out, and to any and everybody that sees it, and then either they're going to do something about it, meaning make the change, or they're going to just not say anything. But in that, you keep going, you keep educating, you stay current on the trends, stay current on the developments, and knowledge is power. And so you have to really know your power, and that is something that I've tapped into very well.
Yeah, and the registry is it works through, and I'm putting works in quotes, you know, uh trying to shame and isolate people. And what you're articulating, is that it's you've reclaimed that power by not letting it isolate and shame you,
Right,
by being out and being very open about it. And people can't knock you down because you're owning it. So
right,
um,
absolutely.
so that's yeah, that's really impressive. Yeah. So and then this, Willie, this one's for you. So in your experience, how has education influenced your ability to really integrate into society and make positive life choices since your offense?
Well, for me personally, what I left out initially was the therapeutic aspect. The therapeutic aspect has been the bedrock of everything that I've been able to do. So I got a phenomenal forensic therapist that I've been going to for about 6 years, named Dr. Bill O'Leary. He's been extremely instrumental in terms of being able to get me into certain doors, or keep me in there for many respects. So the question commonly asked when I go into certain places and they looked on the rap sheet is, what have you done to address that issue? Like, not so much of you me having the academic skills, but what have you done to assure that you're not going to pose a threat to our campus or our students? So that was the benefit of the forensic piece, that I can constantly say, well, I got the forensic experience with being in therapy for over 6 and 7 years, in addition to actually learning something. It's not just that I was going there. It was a lot of contention initially, and I was arguing with the therapist. But eventually, going to those groups, um, Dr. Bill O'Leary was instrumental in actually aiding and assisting the parole department, along with him and many others, with aiding and assisting me with getting off the registry. So the very parole officers who I used to once, argue, with daily when they retired, because they weren't going to do it when they were parole officers, they actually came to court and aided and assisted me with getting off the registry. So that right there was very beneficial in terms of just thinking for the future. Even though things appear one way at the moment, this is really a marathon. This is a long-term game. So there might be a lot of doors closed right now, but that don't mean they're going to be closed tomorrow or next week or next year. Laws are changing daily, and we have to be. It helps to be optimistic and to realize that the relationships that we build today have real ramifications tomorrow. So today we're having a little podcast, but people move up, people get promoted, people go into Albany, people get into different careers. And behind the scenes, people can, wield their influence. Very rarely has it ever been publicly that a person has come out and say, well, this is what we can do. But the informal conversations behind the scenes has been priceless in terms of the people that I've met in the rooms who are parole officers, who are probation officers, who says, well, we can't help you publicly, but we'll see what we can do when we have the backdoor conversations. And many of those conversations have, facilitated me being able to have access to certain places that without those conversations, I just would have never had. So, and lastly, I like to mention the program, like I said, at John Jay College, the whole Student Success Initiative program. You know, the students and the faculty that work there with shoestring budgets, and I'm calling them all hours of the night. They're not even working. I'm emailing them, they're responding. And I know they were like, like, God, really, we have a job, but like, I'm got them on like 24 hours, like they're my hired hands or whatever. And that really wasn't the case, but they really were passionate about the whole social justice. And they were really instrumental as well in terms of just um, sitting down, having sounding boards with me and creating conversation like, Willie, this is what we think we should do going forward. Or this is what we think you shouldn't do, because there's so many fights to fight that many times I had to be dissuaded, like, Willie, like, what are you really going to get out of this fight? I mean, you have many more pressing issues, but some of the issues that you want to swing at, it's just not worth it. So, I think that was very the John Jay program. And lastly, Emily Horowitz, she's just been such a great guide and support for me. Like, and she met me years ago, but I always kept an email. I always tap in with her, and she would always respond promptly, no matter what. Whether I can come see her, she'll meet me, and she's just been a great mentor. So I think that that right there was like the real basis of my whole education. In a nutshell, it wasn't just the formal education, it's the informal conversations that I had with the people that I met in groups like this, Amber, people like that. It's no real way to measure the value that they're going to bring in your life, because it's or you're going to bring to their life. It's just exponential. So I would think that, just come to the rooms, come to places like this, come to the workshops, and you never know what you're going to get out of it, but I'm sure you're going to get something that make and improve your life, to make you a better person.
Yeah, and what's that? Is like a cliche about like, part of success, a big part of success is just showing up.
Right,
And
right,
you're showing up. You're showing up and you're showing up real, right? I mean, you're there and you're taking it, you took it, you made sure to take to access the things that were available and go above and beyond. So,
right.
and I think that's the story of all three of you, right? It's going above and beyond and so far above and beyond. These is incredible stories. So, Kim, we're going to close out this segment before we start asking or allow people to ask questions. And I see some coming in the Q&A already. If anybody wants to put some in there, they can ask that. But I'm going to ask you this last one, Kim, for this section, and that's what message do you hope that others take away from your story of courage, perseverance, and adventure? Willie, you could stay on camera if you'd like. That's okay.
Well, like I said, I really want people to believe that they can pursue their dreams and that they can still have a life. And I very personally understand the limitations and the trauma that we deal with. But I also believe that we can overcome the obstacles that get in our way, whether those are the government, society, or even ourselves, if we can hold on to the belief in who we are. And I know the shame, the denigration that we're subjected to can really cut into and cut away at that belief in ourselves, because we're told over and over and over that we're bad, we're dirty, we're perverted, we're monsters that can never change. And when you're beaten down like that, with these messages for years, it's hard to not to internalize them. No, I understand that, but I made the decision that I'm not going to let anyone else define who I am. I know who I am. And I may not be able to change the labels that the system and society have forced on me, but I can refuse to let them define my worth, because my validation comes from within, not from what anybody else thinks about me or says about me. So that's the work I think that we need to do in order to be able to pursue our dreams and to persevere and to build a life that's more than just survival. So I just want to say to my brothers and sisters who are hurting in this situation, we deserve better. We deserve better, but we can't wait for someone else to give it to us. We have to believe that we deserve better. And we have to treat ourselves like we deserve better, no matter how society may treat us. Because the truth is that we are so much more than the sum of our worst mistakes. We all have something valuable to offer this world. And we can start by offering it to ourselves. And that's the hope that I want to offer to people. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, no, I'm just in the seat, but you actually did the real moderation there, so thank you. No, that you said it. It's and you and I had a couple conversations recently about the fact that there are real challenges and that there's real stuff, and we have to acknowledge that, right? Like for all the work that you did, Willie, Robert, what you've done, Kim, you had to face some really difficult times and really tough moments, and you didn't overcome them by pretending they didn't exist. You had to hit them head on. You had to acknowledge them. You probably had some sense of grieving, and then you rolled up your sleeves and got active and moved forward. So that's just major applause for the three of you. And so we're going to turn to some of the questions that we're getting in the Q&A, and you guys don't have to look at them. I'll read through them, but I'm going to actually start with someone actually I'm going to acknowledge someone who helped us put tonight together, and I'm going to take his question first, and that's a question coming in from JB. And he asks, this one is for Willie, if individuals require financial support to help them reach their academic aspirations, what advice could you offer them?
Well, it's very difficult to access career jobs, initially because you got to gain capital first, so that's the hardest part of actually being on the registry, getting the first chance, getting some time in society where you gainfully employed. What I figured out though, and what I realized for me is that once you get one job, it's easier to get another job. But the hardest part is getting the first job. As far as going to school, you're entitled to financial aid. You're entitled to financial aid. For me, for whatever some apparent reason, and I only can speak for me, they continued to say I didn't have my selective service. I personally think when they saw who I was, they're like, how did this guy even get into the school? And they were like thinking there's probably some kind of error or glitch in the system, and I would just go away. But the school does provide financial aid. When your income is below a certain level, you're entitled to Pell, you're entitled to TAP. If you're in New York State, I don't know what state you're in. So if you're in New York State, you're entitled to the same financial assistance that everybody else is entitled to who falls under certain financial income. So that's how it goes in New York. I don't really know exactly where you're from, but in New York, you're entitled to public assistance in terms of tuition assistance program, TAP, as well as Pell.
All right, thanks, Willie. We've got two in a row for Robert, and the first one's pretty quick. And it says, doesn't a sentencing judge have to notify you that you're obligated to register? They do in Nebraska. And then the next one, I'm going to give you two. The next one is, what, in addition to sharing your story and addressing HIV criminalization, sustains you? So the first one's about, doesn't a judge have to notify you? And the second is, what fills your cup?
Well, I will say to the first question, the court did sentence me incorrectly. I didn't go into detail about it. I was given a probated sentence initially, and then, when you're given the conviction and the sentence, and you go to the probation office and to, register for probation, that is where I learned I had to be on the sex offense registry. Just totally shocked and surprised. And of course, I was reluctant, but the probation officer said, if you don't, then you violate yourself. And that's like 6 months automatically going to prison. And so I wasn't trying to do that. And so I went through that process of registering, fill out the paperwork, and I immediately went to my attorney's office and let her know that I had just had to register. Um, had to register, and so she filed a motion, and we filed a motion in court to address that specific issue. Um, and it took months. And so I was given a 2-year probated sentence. I was pretty much almost a year in the probated sentence. That's how long it took for the court to look at that motion and what have you. And so when they finally did look at the motion, they're like, oh, yeah, you do have to register, but you have to go to prison. And so they had to modify the sentence and resentence me to prison after me being on probation for a little over a year. So that's how that came about. So that's why I say it's a little bit complex to explain, and so I wasn't trying to take up all the time with that. And so to the second question was about how am I sustained
Yeah.
through the HIV crim work? My truth. I think about the many people that look like me, particularly as Black gay men in the South, where HIV is prevalent across the South, as well as the mass incarceration. So when you put the two together, we have a crisis around HIV epidemic, and we have a crisis around mass incarceration, and it's the perfect storm. And it's, as I say, it's another way to criminalize Black bodies or people that look like me, and anyone, of course, that's living with HIV. And so it's many things like that that sustain me, because I care about people, any and everybody. I care about my people. I care about myself. And again, I recognize the injustice of HIV criminalization, criminalizing people based on their health status. What other health status gets that? And I see why it's being done. It's not being, yes, there's fear to any diagnosis, but this is beyond fear of that. It's the way that they characterize people. It's just a proxy to criminalize gay people, to criminalize sex people who do involved in sex work, and again, people who look like me. And so these are the truths that I'm discovering and learning that they're not saying out loud, but yet the practices show otherwise. And there's data from the Williams Institute to show the significance of how these laws have been wrongly enforced over the years. And I'm grateful for that data because it enforces the stories and things we've been saying. And now we have the data to back it up.
All right, thank you. This one's for Willie. This is from Madeline. She says, wow, you must have been a really good student to have succeeded after being out of school so long. Who in your life supported your efforts to enter school and succeed? And how do you plan to use your degrees? And you may have answered some of that already. So you just
Yeah, so I did answer most of that. The family members were definitely there, my wife and my few significant family members. But my therapist, Emily Horowitz, in the program at John Jay, the Student Initiative Program, and all of the faculty and students, they kind of became my extended family. They kind of guided me through all of the heartaches and the headaches. But I did graduate with honors. I did graduate with like a 3.8. So that was good. You know, it was very hard, you know, but I had to graduate with a good grade to put more emphasis on it, that individuals who come from registry backgrounds, that has nothing to do with our intellectual abilities, you know. So just like the young man Robert mentioned, the criminalization of people that's dealing with HIV, there's like a criminalization for being on the registry, like you're intellectually incompetent. All you can do is drive trucks and shovel. No, we could do other things. We could counsel. You know, and one of the things that I left out earlier is that when I went and got my credential alcohol substance abuse counseling certification, I was denied. They said I was unethical, and I had already went through a whole battery of psychological tests to be able to enroll in the program. I already had to go through a 9-month program of mental health where I went through battery tests, psychological aptitude tests to assure that I wasn't no social deviant. I watched videos, hooked up to all kind of lie detector tests before they would even allow me into the program. And then after getting all of that cleared, when it came time for Albany to grant me my certification, I was denied. They said I was unethical. So that's the hurdle that's constantly being faced. That even after you get the academics, you still have to be able to show that you have good moral standards and ethics.
And were you able to do that in the end?
Well, so the credential alcohol substance abuse, no, they didn't grant me that. So now I'm going when I pursue my license because I'm going for my licensed mental health counseling. That's a license, you know. So by then I'll have like 33 years from the time that I actually committed this sex offense, and I have many years of proactive and pro-social behaviors. So we're thinking that this shouldn't be a problem, but we got to see when we get there.
So it's ongoing. Yeah. Okay. Kim, I'm going to give this one to you. Is there help for family members or parents of people who are registered? The stigma for us is real.
Yeah, I know it is. And I learned this when I started connecting with family members that they experience so much of the same shame and isolation that we do, which even though they have not committed any crime, which makes no sense, but they go through a lot of the same thing. I mean, I think there are lots of support groups out there for family members. There are fearless groups that we have, peer circles at Restorative Action Alliance. I think it really helps to connect with other people who understand this unique situation, whether it's as a loved one or as a person on the registry. And they're so much of what we're dealing with, they're also dealing with. So I would say reach out to us or an organization in your state and see if there's a support group. I think we really need to start standing together and supporting each other because we're stronger in numbers, and it is hard for the rest of the world to understand this unusual situation we're in until we, as Robert said, until we start educating them.
It looks like Amber also put some additional resources into the chat if people want to look there. I know we have Sean here from United Voices for Sex Offense Reform. We have some other people as well. That's another group that draws people from all over the country, as well as NARSOL and WAR and other groups. So definitely lots of support. Reach out to us afterwards if you're not finding what you need, and we can try to help point you in the right direction. Or in a direction. In a direction. Okay. I'm just going to share with the panelists that one of the questions was a comment. Thank you for sharing your experiences. Your stories bring hope and provide validation for others. I feel empowered. So that's really nice. Let's see what we got here. Robert, do you know approximately how many people on the registry have do you know how many people have an HIV criminalization case?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know them for all the states, but I'll speak about Louisiana because I think I got that by memory pretty well. 91% of Black men in Louisiana have been charged or convicted with based on an HIV arrest.
I'm sorry, do that again.
91% of Black men in Louisiana have been arrested or convicted on a charge of HIV that's related to HIV. 75% of the people I'm getting this number mixed up. It's like 75% of the people that are uh, on the registry, most of them are only on there because of the HIV conviction. That's their only offense. So the numbers don't lie. So that tells me, again, there's reckless enforcement as it relates to this law, simply because, one, with HIV, many people aren't as informed and educated about HIV, including our law enforcement, including our courts and so on and so forth. And legislators, there's education that needs to be done there because a lot has changed over the years. The advancements in science and treatment now to where people if they're able to be in access, have health care, and have access to retroviral medication, they cannot transmit the virus if they have an undetectable viral load. And so that is called U equals U for those that are interested in that. So that is just for Louisiana, but it's similar patterns in Tennessee, in Mississippi, in Georgia. But I at least try to memorize the Louisiana because that's where I had my experience. But even in that, it's very telling.
And in the time that you've been advocating, do you see that things are getting better or worse as a trend? And has there been a radical shift in 2025?
So there is a HIV decrim movement and there have been a few things that have changed. For example, in Tennessee, people who are convicted of an HIV related, like in similar conviction that I had, they're now not, they no longer have to be on the sex offense registry. So that's a win. And that was just a couple of years ago. That is a great win. I would just say in Louisiana, this kind of arises out of another situation. That was regarding someone that was on the registry. But in Louisiana, they no longer have to put sex offender on the driver's license for people who are on the registry. So though it's a small win, but in some way it's a huge win because just having sex offender on your driver's license is awful. And just today, it doesn't address the registry, but the governor in Maryland just signed a law that repeals their HIV criminal law. And so there have been several states, Illinois, that repealed their law. I think it's up to 5 states now that have actually repealed their law. And so there's been some wins, big and small, but the momentum has built. And I just want to say that in this, we do talk about registry. We have subgroups, and so we talk about it all the different aspects of it. And so for me, the work in the HIV decrim movement is building. There's momentum, and in that we've had some wins around as it relates to the registry to issue. And so we're just going to continue to keep going forward because we know what we're doing and we know that it works. And again, that starts with education and coalition building and so on and so forth.
Thank you. This one's for Willie. What has your experience been working in construction? I'm 5 years out and have been shut out of a few jobs and industries because of my background, so I'm considering entering the trades.
So construction has been good. I'm actually in an administrative body now. I've kind of worked my way up. I started off, just a regular member. That's more based on the best ability. The best ability in construction is dependability. That's pretty much what it is. Just showing up every day, doing whatever job, and not turning nothing down. So whether it's going in the tunnel, going in the power plant, going in the sewer plant, and you don't turn nothing down, you become valuable. They know if there's a job, they could send me to the job. There's not going to be what's the job, or if it's too hot, it's too cold. So construction is very open, and if you work hard, it's pretty much working more with your back than your brain. But you got to use your brain so you don't get hurt, but you definitely got to have way more back. You got to push wheelbarrows and, be in real, environments that have a lot of contaminants and things such as that. But they're very, if you're physically fit, you're in shape, you could do pretty well in New York in terms of construction.
All right. Now we have a woman saying, I'm on the registry living in Pennsylvania and have primary custody of my two elementary age sons. I'm 1 year into a 15-year registration. My probation officer told me that Pennsylvania law states I must get permission from my children's school district to attend their sporting events, concerts, art shows, etc. Do any of you have any tips on how to get granted permission from the school superintendent? Are there any civil rights groups that could advocate for me or laws that could back me? I'm going to start off by saying that's a real challenge. um, then that and we may have other answers from people here, but I would say as someone who was a parent who had children in the school system when I was on the registry, I had to find other ways to have a relationship with my children that didn't involve anything to do with the school. Um, so it's just the reality of where we are. But I don't know, do any of the three of you have any thoughts on that?
I would just say it's heartbreaking. I'm not a parent, but I've worked with people who are, especially other women who've become parents and who've been on the registry as a result of their HIV diagnosis and so forth. Um, the ways it's definitely is a battle. It you have to because I imagine for a woman, for a mother, you have to balance your energy with taking care of your kid as well as the energy to fight, right? And I think you have to just kind of sit with yourself and ask yourself if being able to attend events at the school, of course you want that. There's a lot of value to it, but do you have enough strength to want to fight it? Because the moment you do it, you have to be visible, and you have to sort of be ready to weather through the storms of what will come. And I will say you can do it. You just have to find the strength within, and you have to find the support, the people or the networks locally or even nationally that will do their best to support you, as much as possible. And also, you'll have to figure out how to develop a relationship with somebody either at the school or someone that's in the school district office, wherever it might be. Um, you have to begin that work as well. And so it's like having to do multiple things all at sort of at the same time in a sense, as well as come home and be a parent and mother to your child. Um, so I just offer that to know that, it is a struggle, but it's just all in how much strength you have and if you really want to do that, you know.
And I just add that Amber put in the chat. I met with the superintendent directly, very prepared with some success and spoke in front of school board, would be happy to chat. And, the other thing is if you need people to speak on your behalf and advocate for you, I mean, I'd be happy to talk with somebody. I know Amber would be happy to talk with somebody, right? So, and other people could be your advocate potentially, if you think that might help. I think it's important to keep, if we go back to what the the three here talked about earlier, there's no obstacle that you can't overcome. It's but there is um you have to weigh the risks, and you have to figure out, as Robert's saying, how much energy to put into it versus having that relationship with your children, what's really important. Maybe there are other rituals and things you can do to show them you love them, and that you support them, but that it's just these are things that you're not going to be able to do possibly. Okay, So, does anyone know of any states that have had any success in getting their legislators on board with the change? It seems like, at least in my state of Washington, they don't want to align themselves with a sexual bill because they don't want to ruin their chances for reelection.
Yeah, it's the same in New York. So I've actually went to town hall meetings, spoke with many politicians, and their common question was, "Give me something I can take back to my constituents. Give me something that I can stand in front of a podium to say to my constituents and the public that will make them supportive of the bill." And there's not really much I can think of. Like how could you? Because when you hear it, it always sounds just when you hear certain things. Oh, he took advantage of a child. He's a predator. The emotional overtones and undertones of those terminology, it leads people to want to be more likely and inclined to say, let's err on the side of caution. Just like Jason just mentioned with the school thing, um, certain battles you just got to pick and choose, because you're going to run into a lot of them. And then in addition, what are you putting your child through? Now your child, I mean, not all children are very nice. When you're getting a little discrepancy now in the school or in the hallway, that's the child or that's with the parent who's on the registry. So we got to also think about the children as well. So I ran through a similar situation like that when I first came home, and I had to get talked out of it. Like, Willie, that's really not a really viable argument. The parents, you think they're going to be supportive of you coming to the school? They don't know you from Adam. No. And then if you make too much attention, they're going to have a PBA meeting or another meeting to push back, and it's not going to be good for you. So just coming home, I think one of the best things to do is just lay low, work as much as possible behind the scenes, be instrumental, be proactive, but just be mindful that all fights are really not worth fighting. And taking on the opportunity to fight coming to the school, I would pass on that opportunity.
I just want to say, if I can, it's important for us to understand that why I say storytelling is important. Whether your story goes public or not, it needs to be out in some sort of way. Because the way people are learning about you, as Willie just said, they don't know about you. And the way they only know about you is as someone who's on the registry or someone that did a bad thing, but they don't know anything about you. And that's one thing you do own is your story, your experience. And so in some kind of way, whether you get it written down as a narrative to be able to share in other ways, it doesn't have to even be public, but it needs to be out. It needs to be documented in a way. And I'm not talking about the story that the state makes about you, the story that the police or any legislator or anybody. I'm not talking about that. So I'm talking about your story, about who you are, and perhaps how did you rise to that situation. Again, it's unfortunate we have to tell people in this country stuff. We want to claim that we're a leader in all things, but we know nothing. We know nothing. And I find that people are very ignorant. They're very, and you see it and you deal with it all the time, which is why we're in this situation that we're in, because people refuse. Some people want this to happen. They want us to be like this. So sometimes you can educate them and it doesn't matter. It's just that's the way they are. But there are some people out there that you can change their hearts and mind if they understand your experience. That's why it's important for you to lead your story and not allow the state and these other entities to tell your story. And I will also add that if a legislator doesn't know anything, that's a problem because they were elected to represent people in their districts or wherever. I find it disheartening, and it's that legislators are not as informed. They have to be informed about all issues, but they have a staff, and I guarantee you, they have some people who are on the registry within in their district. And if they don't know anything about how those people are living and their experience beyond just the registry, then that's a problem. That is probably somebody, well, they probably don't think that they get that person your vote anyway, because you have a record, right? But hopefully you're able to have your voting rights reinstated. And so I just add that there are things that we're not looking at here, and we're just kind of accepting. And there's ways to poke holes in some of those arguments, but definitely capture your story because that's your story and your experience. And if nobody else acknowledges you, at least your story is there. And you can say, this is what I experienced, this is who I am, regardless of what they may say about you.
And I just want to add, when you're telling your story, Robert, I don't think what you mean is give them all the details of how you committed your offense and what you did. What you're talking about is owning your story of this is my character, this is who I am, these are the positive ways I contribute to society, to my family, and that.
Absolutely. Yes. You don't always have to go into detail because everyone's curious about, ooh, the details. But you can mention, yes, I was arrested and this is how it started and this is how it ended. But you don't have to give them all those intimate details. They don't need to know that.
Right.
And I want to add to this that legislators, politicians, they're about getting votes. And so they're going to vote for bills that are going to be popular, and our issues are not popular. So to me, the key is what Robert's talking about, educating people, sharing our stories, humanizing those of us on the registry, getting rid of these stigmas that people have about this certain type of person that's on the registry, and helping to increase awareness in our communities so that it does become a more popular idea to vote in favor of kinder laws for us in these situations. That's when the legislators are going to listen. When the, that's where the buck stops for them, where the vote is. When the voters say, we want to see change here, that's when they're going to make change.
Absolutely. All right, this one's coming from JB again. What resources can someone on the registry utilize to understand state registrant time limitations while traveling? That one's for you, Kim.
Okay, say that again.
What resources can someone use to understand what are the time limitations for each state while traveling?
And we do have a couple of resources to share. There's a couple of websites that people can use where there's been research done. I think they try to keep them up to date. That's really helpful. When I did it, I didn't know about those, and I went to every state I wanted to go. That's why it took me a really long time. So this would definitely save a lot of time. I mean, you can go look at the laws in that state, but just keep in mind they're ever changing. So yeah, I think Amber's putting them in the chat. Those resources would be really helpful.
So it's that A to Z blogspot with it spelled out the way it is, and the other one, and those are in the chats. Okay. This is a comment. We've got, I just do a time check. We have another little less than 15 minutes. So we're gonna keep going through some of these questions. And then we've got a nice little wrap up closing at the end. So regarding parent on the registry, I wonder if, oh, yeah, I just was informed 2 more questions and then a wrap. So regarding parent on the registry, I wonder if Willie's strategy of getting support at lower levels, teachers, other parents, campus security office would help get approval at higher levels. So that's any comments on that one? That's not really a
I
question.
think the lower levels is definitely more reception on the lower level from my experience. The people on the lower level can, you have access to the people on the lower level. But the people as you get up to the higher echelons, it's just more like plausible denial, like it's very rare for certain things to even reach their desk. They're insulated by so many people that it's like you pretty much should know that I don't want to deal with that issue. Right. So when I did actually access people directly after many, many lengthy periods, I kind of got the look like, what are you doing here? Like, oh, how did you get here? And then, they would deal with me and then we would develop relationships moving forward. But there was that initial shock, like, you weren't really supposed to even be able to access me. So I think that it is definitely beneficial to make those alliances on a local level, in a small level, in informal groups and settings like this. But the plan is to be able to work up to the upper echelons. That's the plan.
Okay, I see. And then I see two, I'm going to do two more quick questions, but the first one's more if anybody has a resource to help. This one says, I'm a single disabled senior man, registers in a southern state. I have definite skill sets, but under current circumstances, it's better for me to work from home. There's money needed to start up what I can do, something I don't have. Any recommendations for help, possible help groups or resources as someone who's single, disabled, and senior that they can contact? I can go into more detail outside the chat. So if anybody has some help for that gentleman, please maybe just put it in the chat. And then this one is, please talk about the worth of having a spouse, a parent, a child of someone who's on the registry. Talk about their experiences in dealing with the registry. Do you
Well,
understand the question? Yeah.
you
Yeah.
said the parent or the spouse?
So a spouse or a parent. So if you're on the registry, it's the people in your orbit, right? Um, Having them talk about what their experience was dealing with the registry. So how it impacts you, or how it impacts them, right? If you're a child, how it impacts and the value of that. And I would say, I'll start it off as the moderator, but I would say there's tremendous value in having people come in and advocate for you. I would also say there's also risk involved in it. So, you have to weigh those risks and those benefits. I have some stuff going on right now, and as I'm looking for employment, and I have a couple of grown daughters, and one of them's like, "Who do I need to call? What do I need to do? I'll do it for you." And I said, "You know what? Go live your life, do what you're doing. Like this is mine. This is mine right now, right? I don't. But there is a point where it does make sense to have those people around you, especially if you're going to go do some sort of testifying at the state level or local level, to have those type of advocates around you to help you and stand up and say, this is how it impacted me. Like if you're looking to change registry laws, the fact that everybody on the house in the house in the same living space, whether it's house or apartment, whatever, but is basically under those same registry is at risk, because that individual is on the registry. So it does impact everybody. I don't know. Do any of you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just echo what you said, Jason. And again, stressing the importance of your story. That could be part of your story. And I think once you get involved, really get involved in this, you kind of know when something's a risk or when it's risky or what have you kind of feel it, or you see who the players are and or the opposition or the resistance is. And so you know when to play your card and when not to. But I strongly echo all that Jason has said. And just again, knowing your story, articulating your story, your narrative, and being able to include that in, because that is something I think is a nice strategy for legislators. They care about family, safe public safety, and all these things. So, okay, you care about family. All right, I'm going to tell you about how this affects my family. And in fact, you can get these quotes from them or these video or whatever, So, if they care about it, then give them what they care about.
I think in general, this is key to advocating, because to understand what people who have committed no crime are having to live with, that they are being punished, is something that people might be more sympathetic to. So I think this is a very important part of advocacy, to have to talk about what families go through because they love somebody on the registry.
Yeah, and we've had on the Amplified Voices podcast, we've had various family members come in and talk about their experiences. So, if anybody needs to hear from a daughter, say on the registry, or hear from a spouse or a parent, we've had them all come and talk about their experiences, and we'll do more of that over time. So it doesn't have to be your parent or your child. You could have somebody else's experience, and that's just another tool that you have that you could always use, is have somebody listen to one of these stories, because they're real people telling their real stories. So all right. Well, we're coming up on the hour, so I'm gonna thank everybody for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for being here, listening to these stories, and what Robert and Willie and Kim had to share with us. Thank you, Willie, Robert, and Kim, and thank you to Jesse behind the scenes, who's helping us tonight, and Amber for coming on beforehand, and Kim did a lot of work in preparing this over the months, and Melinda got us started with the education work. And thank you for everybody that put us in touch with Robert and Willie, and thank you, thank you, and thank you. And if I'm missing anybody, it's because it's not intentional. So thank you. And thank you to the three of you for sharing your journeys with us. We hope that everybody that's on the call tonight will join us. Our next webinar is going to be a few months from now. We got to get through the summer, but it's going to be October 22nd, same time. And the theme is going to be navigating the holidays. So we're going to be talking about, because that'll be right before Halloween. So we're going to talk about Halloween and Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. And so keep an eye out for more information on that. If you enjoyed this program and the work that Restorative Action Alliance does, we ask you to consider making a donation at restorativeactionalliance.org/donate. And if we couldn't answer your question today, you can send an email to admin@restorativeactionalliance.org. That's admin, ADMIN, at restorativeactionalliance.org. We're going to have a recording of today's conversation available on the Amplified Voices YouTube page. And thank you. Thank you all, and good night.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody. Great job.